nail biters to break down this weekend. Definitely a great finals fixture. Definitely lost a couple of hairs to some grays, but let's get into it.
I need all the wins, yeah. Ain't no L's, I gotta get a no call and quits, yeah. Gotta keep on moving no matter how hard.
Here comes Danny Tusizawa, back to Baker, Baker with the fin. Kurt Baker in for DC, and this may well do it old glory with the try. The New Zealand Sevens legend, Kurt Baker with the cherry on top.
Can you believe it?
I definitely think that these semis were not as, I would say, as crazy as I would say the quarters are, but it did set up for a great final, a Southern Hemisphere showdown between, a very healthy and I'll just say it, very explosive All Black side, and definitely aging and need to find an identity after this World Cup from the box. I definitely think that if I look back on it, if France were a healthier side, this probably really wouldn't have been a conversation. But I'm glad to see that the Bach have made it this far, and they're definitely looking for a lot of things to do when it comes at the breakdown. Because when that spine is on the field of, LaRue, you got de Klerk, Pollard, that team is unstoppable no matter what point. I mean, the forwards have been very well interchanged, but that back line needs to be set. And I definitely think that when they're on the pitch, it's a whole different box side. We saw that in England, when they, one could say hastily subbed off Monty LeBlanc, who has had his ups and downs in this tournament for Andre Pollard. That whole team changed. It took a little bit of time to get that full side rejuvenated, the inclusion of de Klerk, the inclusion of LaRue. But once everything kind of gelled together, obviously that team looked vintage, and it showed in the end when they were able to pull it off against England in those final minutes. Given England, hats off to them for making it this far. I definitely think that they were a different team from where they were like 4 months ago. As everyone said, and I'm sure I don't really have to say it and go into it that much, no one expected them to be here. Between New Zealand and England, I think they had probably the two easiest pools to make it into this draw. But for them to do what they did and to challenge the box at every possession that they did, despite the fact of, I'm gonna put it out there, they had a very disjointed side selection over the last pools, and in the quarterfinals, a couple guys did stand out to me in that match. You had Courtney Laws, who is an absolute freak. I haven't really watched him or England at all for that matter since 2019's World Cup. And by the looks of it, his shredding of his weight has really helped him a lot when it comes to that mobility. He still has that physicality, putting Elliot Daly on the wing when normally I'm used to seeing him in a 12 or 15 jersey was kind of impressive. I definitely think he showed out there. He didn't really have the wheels that obviously like a Johnny Mayer and Anthony Watson would have, but wow, did he bring it on the pitch when it came to physicality. I think he helped set the tone a lot. Everyone's going to look at that hit on Dwayne Vermeulen, and I think that's just an example of how Elliot Daly kind of grew into his newfound role in this position. And on top of that, hey, hats off to the boy, Freddie Stewart. I think whenever you watch him on the screen, he's impossible to miss, his ability to not only manage space, but create it through the high ball, not only through reception, but through kicking. He has an excellent boot. He's probably the best leg that England has now at this point. I think Elliot Daly has been passed by him for at least a couple years by now. He could have easily changed this game. And to me, if England had won, would have been my man of the match. Just because, the box real game plan is simple. Go a couple phases, box kick, try to put the forward pressure on the opponent. That way the defense/offense can always keep moving and keep pressure on their opponent, no matter if they're on or off the ball. And obviously with a guy like Freddie Stewart back there, that's going to take away a lot of their options. And his high ball mastery is near, Josh Adams and Liam Williams levels of just, he's guaranteed to get it. It's automatic no matter what. And on top of that, he'll probably get a couple meters out of it, because let me tell you, that guy has some power. When he turns the legs a little bit, he can get some things moving, and he showed that off really well. It's just impossible not to pick him. He showed up in every part of the pitch. on and off the ball, Elliot Daly would have been my man of the match. And, I think picking Andre Pollard for South Africa was the right move because, like I said, when he came on the pitch, things change, and that's a lot of things to look at. As for pools, like I've said, given the breadth of options that they had in terms of when to pick them, I definitely think that they messed up in terms of making the pool so early. I feel like they should have done it a little bit, maybe a couple months before, something like that. Do it so it's more updated based off of, a team's standings in World Rugby, etc. Put a couple, spread out basically that that meat grinder that Ireland and South Africa and Scotland had to go through. Because there should never be a point, I think, in any tournament where you're going to lose out probably some of the best teams to play for that title spot. And we saw that with Ireland. We kind of saw that with France with their injuries. You can't give any team a real easy shot. But I mean, that goes for anything. I mean, in sports, if you dig down deep into it, especially with, one could look at, for all my football fans in America, the college football playoff is one. Some teams just, especially in the SEC and the Big Ten, have an easier shot, whether it's, media rights or, primetime games or spots in the committee. I know it's hard to say in practice, but has to be some way to make the competition have a little bit more parity and bring these teams in. And for all I know, I'm not going to say put all tier ones and then versus tier twos, still keep that mix, but make it more accessible for other teams to be able to advance further. And I think that'll go a long way in not only growing the game, but also ensuring that these smaller nations can then move up the totem pole. It should not be kind of locked to how it is, and hopefully we'll see that moving forward. I think Bill Beaumont, Augustin Pichot, and the boys have a lot to look over this World Cup. A lot of good things to glean over, but a lot of things to improve. And on top of that, that goes for the teams as well. There'll be a lot of rebuilding. I think we all can speak for the obvious. You have your Irish, you have your French teams, your South Africans, kind of New Zealand, not really, but definitely Scotland, that need to have rebuilds after this year, whether it's retirements or, losing eligibility in terms of Richie Mwanga for New Zealand, Bowden Barrett, going to Japan, Aaron Smith as well. There's a ton of teams that, arguably will see a lot of turnover for better, obviously, but it's going to be a sad time, especially, like I said, with last week's show on how, having Johnny Sexton and those guys never see in a semifinal is pretty depressing in my book. They're all-time greats. But, they go down easily as first ballot Hall of Famers to me personally. I'm sure to everyone else as well. I'm sure some of the teams will show up better than most. Obviously, New Zealand has been taking a very youthful approach to a lot of their teams, whether it's the front row with De Groot and Lomax, or you have their back line, with Cam Roygaard and friends. They obviously are a little bit better set up. Scotland, I think, will need to look a little bit deeper into how they're going to do their pivot roles, with Ollie Price kind of just shoved out of the rotation. Finn Russell kind of having a very downward spiral, I would say. And obviously with guys like Stuart Hogg, it's just it's going to be a rough spread for them moving forward. French, obviously, they lost, Uni Antonio, who I thought this year was probably one of, if not the in-form prop for this comp. They're losing I believe one of their locks as well, a couple of their other guys in the back line. It's going to be a little sad to see. Ireland is going to have a very tough time, I think, churning out those rebuilding teams. I mean, they have Craig Casey to fill in for a Connor Murray. They have, a Ross Byrne to fill in for a Johnny Sexton, but that's still, or, even still Jamison Gibson Park. But, it's going to be not be the same side. You're looking at a lot of guys pondering retirement. You have like your Bundy Akis, your Hugo Keenans, I'm sure a lot of those boys are definitely thinking about it, and it's going to be a little bit of a sad time and definitely an adjustment, because no matter how quality a guy like Craig Casey and Ross Byrne is, they're not going to replace the amount of test experience, the amount of management of that field that Johnny Sexton and those guys have, and that obviously has shown through their tests in New Zealand, through their pool stage matches. They're good. They're just, I think they just need a little bit more time to cook. And that'll obviously mean, a couple ups and downs, maybe in the Six Nations for Ireland. I would love to see the Irish boys back up, but, we'll see. I definitely think that England and Wales have something to say about that. Speaking of Wales, they have another loss to their lineup. The great Dan Biggar, who I thought was probably one of the best, I think, redemption stories for a 10 at this World Cup. It's going to be sad to see him go. I loved watching him play. I would love to see what Wales do. That'll be another team that I think will need to have a rebuild of their identity after this World Cup. But like I said, them and England are in much better places because of their coaching, because of their chemistry with the players, and their relative kind of youth in terms of Wales. Not really for England, but mostly Wales. So we'll see what happens with that. As for finals predictions, man, as much as I want to be impartial and say that the Box probably will lose, after what I saw in those final minutes, and given that possibility of a better selection, I have to say the Box will probably get it by 3-5. I hope it's by a drop goal or maybe a chase down, to stop a conversion off a try. But it's going to happen if they can select this team right with that spine of forward and back players. They have a good team around the park that can give a lot of different options to a lot of their players off the bench. My personal suggestions for that bench, which hopefully will be accurate, I'm not sure. I have a couple players that I definitely could toss up in there, but we'll see. We'll go through them one by one. I got it currently as the bomb squad being a 5-2, or you can throw in a 4-3 split. I don't see them doing the 7-1. I don't see them doing a 6-2. I don't even see them doing a 3-5. They're going to have to go for that 5-2 split to really hammer home the fact that this team is here to stay. And I definitely think that bench will be spearheaded by probably one of the better props coming off the bench. Well, best front rows off the bench, really. You have the Oxenniche. That guy is a freak. For him to put the fear of God into the English and a couple of those other boys throughout the pool stages and throughout the playoffs has been huge. I think his scrummaging has been insane, and his tackling rate and his running ability cannot be understated. You have your Vincent Cox, excuse me if I messed up his name, definitely brings in a lot of running ability, and obviously for the lineout, you have Dion Fourie, who can easily play in that hooker or loose forward spot, so it gives him a little bit of utility. Hell, he could probably even play lock, honestly. I'm sure that guy can jump. He's been a freak. His run off that line out to the 5 meters set up that beautiful try to Nagaishi-Lyman that put South Africa in that position to win. Without him, that game would not be there. Quagga Smith, the heir apparent to Dwayne Vermeulen, no matter what anyone says and how small he is, how he just gets bumped off by bigger runners, it doesn't matter. It is all about the IQ. And Quagga Smith is probably the only person on that South African forward pack that's not named Dwayne Vermeulen or Sia Khaleesi who can command that center of the field, be in there at every breakdown, and enforce their will onto the defense to make sure that things go right. And best believe that's how that spine needs to go. Outside of that, I think you need to have a lock. I think Nagaishi-Lyman needs to be there, especially after his performance in that semi. I think the biggest thing for me, though, is the backs and how that will be split up. One could argue Kanan Moody needs to be there, whether it's because he can cover, your 12 or 13, or he can cover a wing/fullback spot. His defense has been great. His offense has been off and on. I'm pretty sure it's mostly because of the way that the defenses have been playing with him, but he's a threat no matter what, and his speed is unmatched. I think the only person that could probably catch him is maybe Beauden Barrett on that New Zealand team, unless they roll out Cam Roigard. Man's a freak. I think the biggest one would be my last slot. Given the fact that their high ball has been put into question over the last couple of games, I definitely think that they need to roll out a high ball guy. And I think that if you look at the way that they're trying to run, I do believe they will start Makazole Mapimpi over Kurtley Aronsa in that spot. I know Aronsa has taken a lot of the starting roles, and he's been great on defense and obviously on attack. We all know how good he is. But when it came to the high ball, it left a lot to be desired because of both him and Cheslin Kolbe are so small in comparison to a lot of the boys up there. And, when you have a guy like Will Jordan on the wing, who's an exceptional high ball man, you have Mark Talea, who's been pretty much on par, if not better than Will Jordan when it comes to the high ball. And you have their, Jordy Barretts. You have your, who else am I whiffing on? There's a ton of Bowden Barrett too. There's tons of guys on that New Zealand team that can easily play the high ball. And they're going to need someone like Mapimpi, who made his bread at the last World Cup under the high ball and then having a full go at the sprint down the sideline. I think that would mean that Aronsa takes a slot on the bench. Another person I think you could see maybe is a Grant Williams. He can slot in at 9 or fullback / wing. We all know how fast he is. We all know how good he is on defense. His attack cannot be understated again. Or dark horse, really, you could put Andre Esterhazen in there. I don't see them doing it. I think given the form of Damon Della and Jesse Creel, they're going to have to put them in. You could argue Kenny Moody would replace Creel, but given the way that Creel's been playing, I wouldn't try to throw off the hot hand, unless he gets a little bit rattled early versus New Zealand, which I doubt. Then they can slot in Moody a little early. But that's where I'm at in terms of their bench. Definitely a lot of things to look at in terms of their game plan, just because they need to manage their long form play. I would say they need to fix the breakdown discipline that they've had, whether it's not binding properly, going off your binds and putting your hands in the dirt. A lot of it was the refs overlooking, as much as I love to say that Wayne Barnes and Ben O'Keefe have been probably some of the top in the world, this World Cup has shown that a lot of the referees have had a little bit of some off days. Angus Gardner as well, probably my favorite referee in the world. It's just I'm not sure what's going on, especially with Ben O'Keefe. I don't know if it's the last couple Chiefs finals in Super Rugby that have kind of rattled him, given the fact that he was kind of flamed for a couple decisions that him and Brendan Pickrell did that kind of threw the game in another direction. That obviously could be a reason why, but just his breakdown, ability to call things from that and the scrum has been significantly, I think, reduced from where I saw it, going past for the last 5-6 years. So definitely something to look at that the All Blacks and the Springboks are going to need to do. Both of them are going to have to play effective breakdown play, and they can't take any chances, because if you give both of these teams any shred of yardage or a reason to put hands to the posts, they're going to do it. And with the Springboks' ability to maul, that's another dangerous thing that they're going to have to look at, that Fozzie will need to look down the pipe. In terms of just the box first, I think their key thing would have to be managing the high ball, they're not going to have obviously a Freddie Stewart or a Damien Peno or a Tomas Ramos on those outside plays that are going to stop them effectively on New Zealand, but they're going to have a ton of players who can put their hands up in the air and say, I can either get this or I can cover you and bring you extremely fast down so that you can't get a single lick of meters off of that. And that's going to be probably their biggest weakness, I think, moving into this. Obviously, if they put back Andre Pollard, there'll be a better management, but you got to pick your battles when you choose them, and definitely avoid the wings. I would say there, if I was in that coaching room, my game plan for me would be to force Bowden Barrett to make a mistake. I realize how hard that would be, given his immense test experience and his great athletic ability, but you have to keep it away from the wings. They're just too good at the high ball, unless you can find space to split behind it. That'll obviously lead to more film study and stuff like that down the line, but something to look forward to. Long form play wise, I think that was just a LeBlanc thing. As I've said before, I definitely think that his ability to manage the game, while it has grown, it has not grown at the pace where the Bach need to be winning test matches at a high level. I think it has grown him a lot since his time has started in this last rugby championship, but he needs to work on, his kicking. He needs to work on his game management skills and his crossfield kicks. He has potential to be probably one of, if not the best 10s in South African history, I think. But I think it all starts with the simple fundamentals, and it'll get better. I promise you, we will see Monty the Bach and not have to rely on a Mornay Stain. We won't have to rely on a Franz Stain or a Handré Pollard to pull us out of games anymore. But I think that was a humbling experience for him in these semis, and him probably not receiving a selection for this game will sting. I'm not saying it won't, but he will have to learn from this and get better moving forward in order to see the pitch at a high level. That's really what I would say their key victories are. As for New Zealand, they need to be wary of the early subs for South Africa. I think that was kind of a shock to me. I've never seen Rassie pull something out earlier than like the 55th minute. So for him to start pulling guys early, I'm sure it was just not only a sign of form, but a sign of pressure. But the Bach, given the fact that they don't do that, now they'll have to account for these schematical changes, because obviously that shakes up the momentum of the game very early. It forces more people to be more fresh throughout the rest of the game. That's something that Fozzie should be looking at, as well as definitely, obviously, as I've said before, high ball retention. They have, they're probably going to select Bowden, Will Jordan, Mark Talea, who have played outstanding when they've been on the field together, for that back three specifically to counter the high ball. And obviously for their attacking ability, I think that's automatic. But if they can manage that and their backspace, which the All Blacks have been known to kind of faff here and there, obviously the All Blacks will have an easier chance at corralling them, because once you eliminate the high ball in the kicking game, puts them more in a one-dimensional side. Obviously for any team, no matter what sport, you make them one-dimensional, they will be easily stoppable. And that's something that you need to look into to really force the Springboks to play as they have. They already showed that in the Rugby Championship, to play in that South African kind of manner, that slow, high ball, kick tennis type of mode. I think they might need to go to that again. And, it worked well for them prior. I'm sure it'll work. I'm not going to say as good, but just as comparable in that regard to move forward. They definitely, I don't think, can play that fastball, obviously, just because of that South African defense is just so physical. You're going to gas people out if you do that. So play the slow ball. Slow and steady wins the race for the All Blacks. They're going to have to be a lot more disciplined in that regard. And that especially goes for guys like Scott Barrett and the boys. They've gotten away with a lot. As much as people want to say, no, they haven't. They have. It's not just the refs missing calls. It's just, lack of discipline. They've been overly zealous and enforceful at the breakdown, and I think that needs to change. And they're not going to get that opportunity to do so, to really fix it on the fly against a Bach team that's just so drilled to the point where they're either going to kick it down your throat, or they're going to force you to go into a scrum or a maul and hope that you last. As we know, while New Zealand can put up a physical, scrum and maul in kilogram weight, they can't put up in that regard to stopping a trained, unified Bach team that's gonna just run downhill, and as Marshawn says, be all about that action. So they're gonna need to find different ways to do it. They have to slow down the game, and that's the only way that I know that they can do it pretty effectively. I'm sure Rassie is probably already researching ways to kind of keep that away from them. I'm not sure if the Boks are going to go back to that flashy open play that they've done in the past. I would love to see them try, though, but without Lebach and that athletic ability at 10, I don't know if they're going to really be able to try to pull that off. As for selections, while you could obviously roll out your normal athletes, your Rico Ioanes, et cetera, I think that because of the way that game plan will be settled out, you could probably be better off selecting with more of an athletic group, a kicking group. I definitely think that they could put Jordy Barrett, hot take, but you can move David Havili to 13. You can kind of flex him instead of a Rico Ioane, because Rico Ioane, yes, he's good, but having an extra kicker on top of that can kind of manage the space would be huge for them on top of Jordy, because Jordy's going to run downhill no matter what, and he has the kicking ability, but it always helps to have that second guy back there. Malonga's probably going to get selected, no doubt. Like I said, with that back three, it's pretty much slated. And obviously with the way Aaron Smith is rolling, I don't know how else you could not select him and Roy Gard off the bench. But that forward group is really going to have to work when it comes to that high ball. I think that this is the time to put in Tupavai. They're going to need to dig deep and go through these, athletic, more potent under the ball opportunities for these players. There's a ton of them. Josh Lord's there. That would be kind of a hot take to put him in the finals, though. But that's just me. I would just say, throw it to the Wolves. Why not? But it's Fozzie's last year. Let him do what he wants. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Hopefully by selection time on Friday, we will have a better idea of what we're going to be looking at, and we'll delve into some more MLR news. But for that, that's going to be the end of our show today. Thank you so much for tuning in. See you on Friday.